This here is my new used Legion desktop. You can see me reflected in it there. I picked this up locally for a good price, used. I did this on purpose because I think these are becoming compelling. You can still pick up this exact same model, new from Lenovo. They have 13th gen now. I'm sure soon enough they'll have 14th gen. You can also get them with AMD. This is an Intel model. This is a 5i. I did this because you can find these refurbished online. You can find them open box online. You can find them new online from Lenovo. And you can find them locally for a really good price. But yeah, you can get these with different specifications here. This is kind of the base, I would say. It does have the 3060 instead of the 3050. I think you can get this with the 3050, which, I mean, maybe if it's really cheap. But unlike a lot of the OEMs out there where you have these proprietary nonsense, this is not proprietary. It has a normal connector for the motherboard. The motherboard itself is relatively normal. You get normal connectors for everything here. Normal CPU bracket, normal RAM, normal storage. The cases themselves are all normal fans. So you can pick one of these up and just use it. This one was 850 Canadian dollars, which is, it's not outstanding, but it's also not bad for what it is. It has a 12400 in it. It has a 3060. It's relatively unused. I actually didn't have a warranty, but I registered the warranty again for $50. That's great. I have an Intel Arc A770, which will fit just fine in here. And I also have a 2080. It's a big 2080. So it's just going to fit. I've already measured it. It'll fit just fine, but it'll be nice and snug. This is a hefty 2080, but you could put in other GPUs as well. The 3060 is still good. This is a 12 gigabyte GPU, 3060, so it's decent power, kind of mid-range power, but has 12 gigabytes of VRAM. So it's very capable at 1080p if you turn the settings way up, especially with that VRAM. But you can even use this at 1440p, especially if you're playing modern games. 1440p can use a lot of VRAM. You can easily get over 8 gigabytes. This 3060 will be able to still play games at 1440p. I am actually planning to use this as my daily desktop. I'm going to get rid of my primary desktop. Isn't this crazy? I'm going to get rid of my primary desktop, and I'm going to use this for a while, just because it's fun. I find this interesting. And I think that, for the budget that it is, I have this $850 for this machine here. A little bit of money to enhance some of the fans just for fun. Didn't pay too much for some RAM upgrades. I'm going to have a new cooler that I'm going to put on here with a new CPU. This also comes with a 500 watt power supply, so you're not going to be tossing in, 4080 or something. I think this 500 watts will be fine that came with it. I want to keep this as cheap as possible. Minimal cost going into it with maximal output. If need be, I will upgrade that as well. But overall, these things are pretty sweet. Like, you get a single NVMe port up there. Underneath here, you get a second NVMe port you can see down there. Upgradable Wi-Fi. You get 2 SATA ports right here and 2 SATA ports here. So there's hard drive caddies back here. I'll show you in a minute. But you can put in 4 more storage devices that are going to be using SATA connectors. So 2 SSDs and 2 hard drives or something like that. And then you can put in 2 NVMe's, 1 and 2. One comes with a heatsink. It doesn't have crazy VRM cooling or anything like that, but the VRMs look fine. You can put up to 4 sticks of RAM. I'm just going to put in 2. I bought some decent enough RAM here. I don't think these motherboards have, Expo. So, it's not going to run super fast, but this should be fine. This will take me up to 32 gigabytes, which is enough. These are both 16 gigabyte sticks. They're fine. 7? Is that 9 RGB headers? There's so much RGB headers. 9. Lots of fans here. 1, 2 fans. 3 fans. This one here, this is just a tiny little blower fan. If you buy this from Lenovo with a 13700 or a 12700, you get a proper tower fan. So, it has the capabilities of supporting a tower fan. I have a monster tower fan that I picked up also locally. I'm trying to keep this as cheap as possible. An Assassin IV, or 4 if you use Roman numerals, from Thermalright. This thing is huge. I forgot how big these are. It may not actually fit. I kind of stuck it in there just momentarily, and it's going to be super close. You can see here on top we get 2 USB-A. We get audio there. There's spots for fans on top if I have room. I will not have room, I think, with this in there, but it's not going to matter. I don't normally put top fans on anyways, and I'm not going to put an AIO in here. Decent ports on the back, too. On the motherboard, you get a 10 gigabit per second USB-C. I put in a mouse to test this out. 4 more USB-A, I guess that's your RGB, RJ45, more audio, your audio slots there, and then you get your power supply. You can see here on the back here that has really good cable management. Like, this is actually pretty well managed. RGB going through the right spots there. Power supply here, you can see it's 500 watts, and it's a standard connector, so it's fine. All the motherboards standard, so there's nothing wonky there. 2 hard drive caddy spots there, so I will be putting in 2 hard drives eventually. 2 gold SATA drives there. And then you have, I can put another SATA SSD up here, which I will put a 4 terabyte up there. And I think these sticky tapes are to stick another SATA drive, I think, because otherwise why would they be there? Let's start enhancing this here. I'm going to begin by testing it stock though. So I'm going to give everything stock. I'm going to get some benchmarks in terms of game numbers, temperatures, all that kind of stuff with the 12400, with the RAM that's in there, the GPU that's in there. Get some numbers off of that, some Cinebench, some game testing, some time spy, some for FPS testing some games, temperatures, and then I'm going to enhance it and see what kind of results I'm getting out of that. Because this machine on its own, you just pick this up, just pick this machine up with a 3060, 12400, 16 gigabytes of RAM, you're good. You can play games. You're going to have no problem playing AAA 2024 games, maybe not at 4K, 1440p you can get away with it, maybe not at ultra max settings, but you will be good to just play games on this. However, I want to push it to the limits because it's going to be my daily driver, so I'm going to enhance it a bit. But let's get it fired up. Let's start testing some stuff. Then we'll enhance it by sticking stuff in and make this thing into a monster. Here we go. I'm going to try to get all this into that. It's all non-proprietary, so it should be mostly plug and play if it physically fits. I have 2 hard drives down here, enterprise drives are going to go in. I should be able to use 2 of these SATA drives in theory, 2 NVMEs, RAM upgrades, 13700, which is going to be cooled by this larger cooler, which hopefully fits. It's going to be very snug. RGB fans, just for flex, I guess. And then 1 of these 2 GPUs. They both should fit in theory. Technically, the Arc is a little bit faster, I believe. Also has 16 gigabytes of RAM. The 2080 is going to be very close in performance. Not quite, but very close. So that comes off there. They're decent heatsink. It kept it cool enough. There was a little bit of throttling, but for such a little pipsqueak. It's not like those Intel coolers, which are a little bit smaller. The generic Intel ones are a little bit less metal, but still, it's not great. Stressful, crunchy sound, and there we go. New CPU. Put the cooler on after. RAM is next. Got the GPU after. So again, this shipped with SK Hynix RAM. Decent enough RAM, but nothing special. Not hyper fast or anything, but these motherboards don't have Expo and that anyways. So hopefully this works. It's used. Did not buy it new. One of the ways you can keep it all depends on your local market. I don't always tell people, just go buy used stuff because it depends on your local market. But where I live, there's a pretty good local market, decent prices, pretty good selection, and it's nice to get used stuff, save some money, recycle. Functional system. So it's a P44 NVMe, very, very high end, one of the highest end consumer drives. Actually, I do have another one. So if I get irritated by the look of that, eventually I might put in another one of these Carter ones, which matches the aesthetic of the whole system. But for now, we're just going to get it working. SATA ports. So I'm actually going to hook up some SATA stuff. So I'm going to put the SATA cables in now. We'll figure these out in a minute, actually. So we'll get these out of here. I'm not exactly sure how the back's going to look. So we'll put these probably down here, over there instead of here, but we'll see. Take this out. So you can put in 13th gen, 12th gen, I guess 14th gen, 12th. Set that over there. Pins are all good, no bendies. Okay, and here's the back. I'm going to have to take that off and put this one on, because that's going to be the new one. Looks like it has some type of mount on it. Has to come off because it's not going to work with what I want. You're probably going to want a pry tool like this. Get it under there because this thing's on there with a double-sided tape. I can't do this while I'm filming, but you can see there it's coming up now. So you don't want to just pull it and break the board. So typically you're going to want to put like a pry tool. I have 2. I'm going to go from one side to the other and just work it around, and then eventually this will come off because this has to come off so I can put my back. Got that out, just slowly prying it. And there we go. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be pretty snug, but it should be close. I'm just going to have to work at it with 2 hands rather than 1. Okay, so here's the CPU here. I was going to use the 13th gen. I have a 13700 lying around from a different PC, like a pre-built that I was going to try. I put it in here. It didn't work. This motherboard, physically 13 and 12th gen use the same socket. there's no BIOS update for it. I tried updating the BIOS for the device here, but it just looks like it doesn't support 13th gen. So, you know, these Legions come with 13th gen or 12th gen, depending on which one you're getting. It's not going to be really that much of a difference in performance from a 13700, because the 13700 doesn't have unlocked, doesn't go with much watts. This one is 12700KF, doesn't have iGPU, but this board doesn't have integrated graphics anyways. So I'm not going to be worried about that F. And then the K part of it means it's going to have higher watts, going to run technically hotter, but also perform better. The cooler that I'm putting on the thing is massive and will have no problem cooling a 12700K anyways. So that's in some ways potentially better. I mean, it would have been nice to have 13th gen just for the sake of having it. And I have my 12700KF. I'll get it pasted and I'll start putting it back together. And I will bring you guys along for the reassembly. Okay, so I put some fresh paste on here. There's still a little bit left on the cooler itself because I didn't want to boot up and do a BIOS update without a cooler on and fry my system. So this is actually TF8, Thermalrite TF8. This is my favorite paste. I have Noctua as well, which is a thinner paste. It's really easy to apply. Normally I actually use Noctua on desktops because they have high mounting pressure and it's middling thickness. This TF8 stuff is super thick. It has a very high thermal conductivity. It's very, very thick. It doesn't dry out very easily. It is excellent paste. I usually use this on laptops and things like Nintendo Switches and consoles that have lower mounting pressure. Like they typically just have like almost like a piece of metal that basically sits on and then pressure will keep it down. So this thicker paste here, I just find that it doesn't dry out as fast and it just works better on those devices. On desktops, I find that, you know, like Arctic and TF8 and that kind of, and Noctua and that kind of stuff works just fine. But I do want to put on my favorite paste here because I don't know, I just want it. It's a very, very, very good paste. It does have to be spread. It's quite thick. It's kind of like that Thermal Grizzly stuff. Okay, and there we are. We're reassembled. We have our 12700KF there with paste on it. One NVMe, second NVMe. I have a bunch of SATA stuff in the back I've already shown there. I have taken out this here in case I'm going to put in a 3-slot. I'm going to decided to go with an all Intel build rather than putting in that NVIDIA GPU. So that's going to be sweet. Everything else is good. I mean, I have everything hooked up. I'll clean up these wires once everything's plugged in. I like to do that after the fact. Just make sure everything works because otherwise I take things apart, put it back together, take things apart, put it back together. So I think we're good to go here. Let's get everything put back together now. I will show you after, but it just fits. Like I'm talking just fits. There we go. So we have the Assassin 4 on there, really about as big as a air cooler as you could possibly get on the system. Is there like anything harder to get off than thermal paste? I'm gonna have to go through here with like a toothbrush and get that off. Super annoying. Once it gets into these little crevices, because there's a little bit of texture to that, you're doomed. Anyways, so that's that there. Just plug in the cooler. There's not a lot of room here. I'll show you in a sec. This is where things get fantastic. I first tested it because this doesn't have video out, so I put in the NVIDIA card. This is the 2080, and my God, is it snug, but it works. So I basically put this in here, and I'm not going to plug it in because I'm going to go Intel, but it sits literally. When this is actually here and hooked up, they actually like touch. Right? They actually sit like that. So this is basically how the system looks with a 2080, a huge 2080 to be honest, a very big card. So you can get a pretty big card in here. This 2080 is a hefty boy, to be honest. It's massive. So I mean, you could get in, you know, 7800 XT, no problem. You could get in 4070 Ti. It'll depend. 4070 Ti Super if you want to go NVIDIA. 4080 Founders would probably work, but I don't think you could go any bigger because you can see that there. A full-fledged, you know, third-party 4080 probably would not fit. I am one of the early adopters of Intel Arc. If you watched my channel a year and a bit ago, before I was even over 1,000 subs, I had, I don't know, maybe 400 or 500 subs back a year and a half ago. I was doing Intel Arc when no one else was doing Intel Arc. Everyone had written Intel Arc off as some kind of meme. And rather than just trying to dunk on it and be like, oh, it sucks, I just started testing it. I started putting together videos, throwing games at Intel Arc A770, 1080p, 1440p, and 4K, and I took requests, and I just had people ask me. Can you test this game? Can you test this game? They just did requests, and I tested the games. So I was a very early adopter, and someone who was promoting Intel Arc. I wasn't saying it was good or bad. Didn't say anything. I just tested the games. The Intel Arc cards have only gotten better too. They were good when they came out, but there were some driver issues with, DX9, DX11. That was solved, a few months later. And Intel has done an amazing job optimizing these GPUs here. You can say whatever you want about Intel in terms of desktop performance, laptops, blah, 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 but they have not abandoned Intel Arc, and I'm very happy about that. And Gamers Nexus just did a revisit like a week ago. I should watch their video, testing the A770 and showing it basically embarrassing AMD and NVIDIA in terms of frames per dollar. It was beating out like the 4060 easily. It was competing with cards that are vastly more expensive. The A750 and the 770. Beautiful card, physically beautiful card. It's going to give it a little bit more room. It's not going to be so chunk in here. It's going to look nice and sleek there. Get you plugged in. And then I'm going to actually put that bracket back in. I took it out for the NVIDIA when I was testing. Put this all back in here, and I'll show you the after image here, but it looks good. That it is so close. This is a thick piece of glass here. It's not a thin little piece of glass, and it is right, maybe a couple of millimeters clearance. I was really worried about it. Alrighty, here we go. Let's hope that it works. Look at that. The Legion Space has RGB controllers. I set it to blue beforehand, so because my Intel Arc has blue and purple. So the Intel Arc has this beautiful blue and purple ring around it. You can change the RGB on this, I believe. There's a little RGB pin, but I set these to be blue, 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 blue. So it's a nice, beautiful build there. Look at that. Very sleek, kind of boxy and utilitarian. The whole system here is nice and boxy, utilitarian. It's got the RGB strip up here to shine some light on the top of it as well. The Intel Arc's looking pretty in there, very, very pretty GPU. Actually, the Intel Arc limited edition GPUs, in my opinion, are the nicest looking GPUs ever made. Isn't that just a thing of beauty? Look at that. So I'm gonna get booted up and I'm gonna do some benchmarks now. See how it performed beforehand with that meh kind of CPU. Decent enough for gaming, but not for productivity tasks, and that definitely an adequate cooler. And the GPU was fine. The 3060 is a good GPU. I'm not gonna hate on that. 3060 12GB has legs. It's still a good GPU, but it's not gonna compete with a 16GB A770. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let's jump to the results now. Fantastic. Very excited that it turned on. And then looking at some 4K ultra-wide Hogwarts Legacy. Don't really worry about the frame rates in that because it's just basically moving around. But really I just want to look at the temperatures here. So you can see here that the 12400 here is getting an average, not super hot, but we're getting an average around 60, 67 degrees. The RTX 3060 is getting not super spicy once again, but 71, hotspots of 84. Not terrible, but also not super cool or anything like that. And then looking at Hogwarts on the new system, you can see here that the CPU is running totally fine. So in Cinebench it did get pretty spicy, but you can see here that in games it's actually running quite cool. So 56, 44, 61, 61. So no concerns about the temperatures there. Screenshot here, and this is and you can see here that the A770 is running a little bit hotter than the 3060. It's just a more powerful GPU, and it definitely pulls in more power. It can get a little bit warmer, but still no problems with it over there. We're looking at about 86 degrees. Okay, and so now we're going to look at some temperatures and Cinebench scores. So the first one here, we are looking at the original scores on the original system. We're getting a Cinebench score of just shy of 11,000, so 10,859. It's okay, it's nothing special, it's just a i5 12400, but it's okay, I guess. You can see here that on the right, the temperature is not terrible. We're getting a maximum temperature around 75, 76 or so on the right here in hardware info, so not terrible, but you can basically get that. There is some throttling according to hardware info from periodically. It looks like it's core power limit exceeded, a little bit of throttling there, so we'll go from that. And then when we moved on to the new system, you can see here that there's a pretty huge increase in performance in Cinebench. We're at 19,648, so basically doubling it, so considerably more capable when it comes to desktop tasks. And that's something that's important for me. You can see over here that we are getting some throttling. On average, it's not running throttling, but it is hot overall. But again, this is a considerably more powerful CPU. Of course, I could add like an AIO for liquid cooling, and you'd get slightly better cooling. But regardless, you can see here that despite the fact that there is some intermittent throttling, the performance is very, very good. So yeah,
It will get a little bit of throttling, but it's still seeing a huge increase in performance with that pretty beefy cooler overall.
And so that is that. Testing is finished. I'm basically just starting to move some files now. So I'm actually very happy with this. I like the way it looks. Nice intake on the front there. I mean, it's all mesh there, metal, right? Look very aesthetic. You can feel the airflow. I can actually feel the airflow from here going in. I mean, you could technically put fans on the top if you want. I don't want to do that. Lots of airflow through the system. So there's a lot of air moving through the system here. I just have it tucked in here temporarily. It's actually, I'm very happy with the machine. You can see my wire mess back here. It came with decent enough specs, but the fact that it is fully modular and there's no proprietary BS on this thing is a really huge upsell to it. I mean, I'm able to upgrade the CPU here. I got a 12400. I put in a 12700. I guess you could do a 900 as well. Better GPU, obviously. This is an Intel Arc, which is a much better GPU than a 3060. I had a 2080 in here when I was testing a little bit too. I'm going to throw in another GPU a little bit later and do some testing, so you can easily upgrade to a better GPU as well. Overall, good airflow, decent enough expansion. I mean, you get that 2 M.2 slots on it. You get 4 SATA slots. I did put in that little card down there. That card right there is a PCI, single slot PCI, and it has an M.2 on it. It's a Ugreen one. I actually have a video coming on that. So that's really cool there too. I ended up adding an extra M.2. So now I have 3 M.2 SSDs on here and 4 other storage devices, SATA-based storage devices here. I do need to do some wire cleanup in that. I'm just basically still testing it, but it's actually really nice. It's not a huge case by any means either. It's relatively compact. I have it tucked back in this area here. It's smaller than the Pop Air that I had. The Pop Air was a little bit taller, a little bit wider, took up a little bit more room. So if you're a little bit hurting for room, this is actually quite nice. I mean, they're not small by any means, and they're not like a small form factor case, but they are relatively big, and I don't know, they just look nice, right? Like, this is the type case you're going to go out and spend money on. Like, you're actually going to buy this case, right? An excellent airflow, all good ports on the back, everything is really nice. It's just overall really nice machine. So I think these Legions are actually pretty compelling in terms of pre-builds, because you can get them for a pretty good price. I mean, you don't even need to upgrade that. You just buy it and use it. But, a couple years down the road, maybe you do want to upgrade it. I mean, that AM5 socket is going to be good for years to come. The 4070, if it becomes like not quite enough, you can just swap it out. So very happy with this machine here. This is going to be my daily driver now, which is super cool. Very happy with this Lenovo Legion here.